Lynn, if you would text Dean and tell him we're on. Um, could somebody make a comment that says you can hear and see me? That would be great. Um, uh, well, I'm really sorry. We're on. I'm not getting that signal anymore. Yeah. Lynn, check the chat to see if anybody's. Well, we're trying to figure this out. Right? Lynn. I'm going to go to the chat for a minute. I'll be right back.
Okay, you're on.
Okay, I think we're on. I apologize. I did not mean to make a diva's entrance. Lynn has been working furiously to try to fix this. So let's just get to it because you guys have been waiting for a long time. Thank you for taking now part of your Sunday, frankly, for taking a larger part of your Sunday than you had anticipated. I really appreciate your being here. So a couple of things before I start reading some of the stories. First of all, as you know, this is not a sales thing. I'm not trying to sell my book. Most of you have the book already anyway. Okay, you want to buy books for friends for Christmas, tell your friend. That's great. But this is really about entertaining. Really? Well, we'll give it a shot. This is about entertaining and also raising money for World Central Kitchen. It's a great organization that feeds the food insecure all over the world. If you want to donate, that's great. Even $1 or $2 helps. If you are donated out, totally understand. Just enjoy spending some time with us. You know I have a YouTube channel. It's called Bases to Bleachers, not a surprise. Please subscribe, watch some of the videos if you like them, like it, share it, comment, all that kind of stuff. Okay, I was able to see who was on, at least for a while, so please do identify yourself. And before I start, I just want to, I want to thank Lynn. She probably is not in the mood to be thanked right now, but none of anything that happens would be possible without Lynn. She is the CEO. What?
I'm the only one watching. Nope, it's not working.
I'm going to stop for 1 second and see if anybody said that they see me. Hang on.
there are 14 waiting, but it's not linking to the original link.
Something just popped here. Do you want to just give it up?
No,
I don't know if anybody's on anymore, Lynn.
there are 14 people on the original link. I'm trying to find out how to maybe send a new link.
Anyway, I could talk and fill some space, but I don't think anybody hears me.
There's nobody there except me.
Right.
There's still 14 people. Oh, Dean said, if Eric just sat down wearing a giant shirt and just told you something just popped, I'm in from the channel, not the link. So say hi to Dean.
Hi, Dean. I don't know if you're the only one. I know there are a bunch of people trying to be on. I just heard a little popping noise again. Is that people entering, Lynn?
You're drinking from, yeah, just
Huh?
a minute. Hold on. All right, so you got in from the channel. So let me see what happened.
You gotta talk.
I am. Well, okay. We didn't know.
Well, I keep messaging.
Okay, Rachel, we're all hearing everything.
Okay. Well, thank you. I guess we're on.
No, but I'm still, the 14 people who aren't connected.
14 people are not connected.
Yeah, that's the link. The link that you sent didn't work. Everyone who's on had to go to the YouTube channel to find it.
Could you?
I'm trying to figure it out.
It's the link that's the problem. So there's nothing I can do
It's hundreds of people. I don't, I know the people that I'm on, so I'll just tell them to go. All right, I'll be back in a minute. I'm going to tell everybody to go to.
No, no, stay there.
Huh?
Don't do
Okay.
dare. Every time you do that, you lose people.
Right. Well, I'm not sure what to do, Lynn, because
I understand that. Just, Rachel, could you come here, please?
Rachel, she's downstairs.
Yeah, you're on the YouTube channel, so just go to. Beans there.
Folks, I'm sorry. I know that some people are waiting, which means you probably can't hear me. Dean, I think you're on, and Rachel was on. I guess you have to go to the YouTube channel, my YouTube channel, Basis to Bleachers, and join from there. Um, I feel really awful, Lynn, and I feel terrible about this. I don't even know what to do, to be honest. I'm just waiting for Lynn. I mean, I could entertain you all with my third grade class: Joel, Robert, Garrett, Lenny, Frank, Charles, Michael, Eric, Ian, Mr. Stephen, Allen, Randy, Billy, Joseph, Luke, Nancy, Charlene, Barbara, Nancy, Kate, Karen, Camille, Kathy, Susan, Deborah, Denise, Eileen, Betty. That's kind of not why you're joining us today. I'm thinking what I may just have to do is record this thing and then send that out to everybody.
No.
Hang on.
Got it. All
Lynn
right,
got
so
it?
I mean, I understand what to do. Okay.
Okay.
Okay. All right, so now I have to get back to the original one. Of course, it doesn't have the, all right.
I'm not sure what to say. Technology. I mean, it's just really, I'm so sorry. David Mariah, if you hear this, which I think you don't, you're correct. Feeling guilty, remorseful, worse about myself, all that stuff. You nailed it. How do you know me that well? I guess if you know me for 5 minutes, you know that.
There you go. Okay, all right, so I'm telling everybody.
So we're on?
Well, I know how to get people on. How did I get to the, all right, there's 7 people that are on. Just,
Should I go?
just keep talking about it.
This is quite a challenge. Lynn wants me to keep talking. Imagine that, me to keep talking while she makes sure that everybody's on. I shouldn't start that though, Lynn?
Yeah.
Start.
All right, but what's missing is the restream link and the.
Should I start?
Yes, more people are joining.
Okay. I have no idea how many people are left. It's been an absolutely horribly long wait. I'm just gonna do this, and we'll send it out to people that were on or whatever. Thank you for taking again part of your Sunday, now an extraordinarily longer part of your Sunday than you had anticipated. We really appreciate that you joined us and tried to join us, and for other people who got shut out, well, we'll get them the link to this. This is not about sales today. I think most of you already have my books. If you want them, buy them as gifts, let me know, that's fine. This is about entertaining people and also raising some money for the World Central Kitchen. which is an organization that provides food for the food insecure all around the world. They're a remarkable organization. If you want to donate, I think the link is there. If you have only a few dollars to give, that's fine. If you're donated out, we totally understand. Just sit back and enjoy some of the stories I'm about to read to you. I think you all know at this point that I have a YouTube channel. It's called basestobleachers.com. Please feel free to subscribe to it, no cost, of course, and then like, share, and comment on the videos. That would be great. I'm really trying to grow this channel. If you haven't already identified yourself, please do so in the comments so that I can write back and thank you and send a link if you have to leave earlier. And finally, before I start the stories, I just want to acknowledge Lynn, who probably is not in the mood to be acknowledged right now. She's been working her tuchus off for a long time to get this fixed. Lynn is the CEO, the CFO. Sam, that's your comments about Angie, so I appropriated them for Lynn. She is the marketing director and the technical director and now the director of videos. The only thing she hasn't done is reapplied my makeup, and she and I are going to have a little talk about that. Let's get to the stories. This first story is from a chapter that's called Triples, and it's 3 stories. Each section of Triples is 3 stories that are in some way or another tied together. This particular triple is about being at a ball game with people from another country. On August 2nd, 2002, well, I'm going to start again. Okay, my wife Jane and I rank between a 5 and a 6 on a baseball fan scale. We like to watch games on television and try to attend a number of games each year, especially if our favorite team, the Rangers, are doing well. In the summer of '93, the Rangers were having a good season, attendance was up, and one of my all-time favorite pitchers, Nolan Ryan, would be pitching against the White Sox. We loaded up and headed to the ballpark. We found our seats, and right in front of us was a young couple in their mid to late 20s from Australia. As we began to chat before the game, they told us where they had been and what they had seen. They were having an adventure, making friends and memories on their travels. Their mates in Australia had told them they needed to go to a baseball game while in the United States, and this was the night. After several innings of strikeouts, walks, pop-ups, and grounders to second, the score was 0-0. The young man turned to his girlfriend and in a typical Australian accent said, "Well, this is bloody boring." He couldn't understand why Americans were so excited about baseball. His next step? Buy a couple beers from the nearby vendor making the rounds. Rangers pitcher Nolan Ryan, a 46-year-old future Hall of Fame right-hander, was having an okay game the first few innings. The Sox batting coach was having his hitters crowd home plate to protect the outside corner. Getting frustrated, Ryan started throwing inside, moving the batters back to increase the strike zone. Robin Ventura, an up-and-coming 26-year-old left-handed batter, came to the plate. Does anybody know what's coming now, by the way? As coach, Ventura hugged the plate, and Ryan threw a high fastball on the inside. Ventura jumped back. To show he wasn't going to be intimidated, Ventura then set up even closer to the plate, and you guessed it, Ryan threw another inside fastball. With a combination of Ventura's location and the speed of the fastball, Ryan hit Ventura in the arm, and the umpire sent Ventura to first base. After 2 or 3 steps towards first, Ventura decided to make his infamous charge to the mound. Ryan squared up, grabbed Ventura around his neck with his left arm, and with his right arm began to beat the crap out of Ventura with his right. Both benches emptied, mayhem ensued. The rest of the story is baseball history. At that exact moment, the Aussie exclaimed, "This is bloody fantastic! It's starting to make me feel homesick!" He then said he now understood why Americans love baseball. To this day, I am fairly certain this extremely excited young Australian believed that having a brawl during a game was a common experience. I did not want to spoil his baseball adventure. That's from Alan Foudy in Dallas, Texas. This is from the chapter that's called My Player, My Team, My Game. There was a chapter in the first book called Why Baseball is Important to Me, and that to me formed one of the core chapters of the book, and I knew I had to repeat that chapter. All different stories, of course, and a different title. In this chapter, in this book, the chapter is called My Player, My Team, My Game. And this is the story. Baseball was my first true love. From the day I was a kid, imagining all my favorite players and imitating their at-bats. I even had a mean Julio Franco approach. The game changed for me over the years, from Little League to playing in college, and then as a coach for over a decade. It has taught me more life lessons than anything else, especially how to deal with failure. In how many other sports can you fail 70% of the time, but still be considered a star? Baseball has taught me to never be fully satisfied with anything in life, especially oneself. There's always room for improvement. I love arriving at a field before everyone else. I love the smell of the fresh cut grass, the sounds of the sprinkler system, the silence of the moment, but still feeling the energy that will arrive. I love seeing a player show up before everyone to take swings, and the sound of the crack of the bat in an empty stadium. I love the family aspect of the game, and the smile or joy you see on a child's face, and notice it's the same smile you see on a senior citizen's face. I love going to games with my son, but can't wait until the day I can do the same with my grandson. Looking into the stands, seeing a grandfather and grandson together, watching and discussing the game has brought smiles, even tears to my face. It's the one sport and part of life that, while everything is evolving around us, remains the same. The game teaches us so much: character, competition, acceptance, humility, respect, loyalty, and friendship. It has brought people of different cultures and races and religions together. I don't have a one-time baseball moment. Baseball has been both a reality and an escape from reality. Being at the ball field is my refuge, my home, my enemy, my best friend. Sitting on a field before a game, taking in all the pregame smell of grass, sunflower seeds, and hot dogs, and imagining the echoes of what is about to take place, that's my serenity, my sanctuary, my peace. And peace is what we are all looking for. That's from Joshua Adkins in Kingsport, Tennessee. Sorry?
8 people watching, there's still.
Okay. This is a story from a woman that I met in the airport in San Francisco on the way to Atlanta. It's from the chapter called Doubles, 2 stories that have something in common, but the stories were so good, it's actually in the chapter called Home Runs. July 1997 was our first summer in Atlanta. I was 7 months along with Connor, very pregnant. For whatever mind-boggling reason, we decided to go to our first Braves game on a hot, melt the makeup off your face muggy night. Our evening started out with us not knowing exactly where to park, and we wound up trekking 1.5 miles. Did I mention that I was pregnant? We sat down to watch the game, and my then husband, Wayne, didn't seem to notice how I was struggling, sweaty, and haggard. Suddenly, a woman behind me tapped me on the shoulder and handed me the frozen ice cream cone she had just purchased. She said simply, "That's the first treat for your baby." I was so grateful for this little random act of kindness. It made me realize that we all have lovely people and moments in our lives. Some expected, some complete surprises. We chatted a little during the game, and when it ended, we hugged. She wished me good luck, and I never saw her again. I really don't remember anything about the game. I don't even know who the Braves are playing. But I will never go to a game without remembering this story and recalling that woman's kind gift to my child that was about so much more than ice cream. And that's Peg Nichols in Atlanta, Georgia. This is a story from the chapter To Catch a Ball or Not. And I wrote it, but it's really my grandniece's story, and here it is. It was March 27th, a Wednesday night, and the last exhibition game before the season began. Family was visiting us in California from Chicago. Our nephew Jeff doesn't care much about sports, but his wife Karen is a big Cubs fan. Their son, Sam, age 13, is a huge Cubs fan, but his sister, Lucy, then 11, likes baseball even less than her dad. Nevertheless, it seemed like the obvious thing to take the whole family to see a stadium other than their Wrigley Field. Lynn and I bought the tickets, and off we went. It was a chilly, weather-threatening evening. Our seats were just a few rows from the field, right near where the visiting A's players were stretching and warming up. Sam was sporting his Little League A's cap, and given the circumstances, preseason, chilly night, small crowd, seats close to the field, and the fact that the Giants were actually playing the A's, it didn't seem much of a surprise when he came running up the rows from the rail with the ball. Still thrilling, but I wasn't surprised. Lucy turned to me and said, "Uncle Eric, have you ever gotten a ball?" The answer was a simple nope, even though I had been one seat away 3 times when my kids, Rachel and David, had scored these prizes. "Never?" asked Lucy, and I repeated my answer. So Lucy, sitting on my lap, said, "I want to get a ball for you." I replied, "Well, that's very sweet, but that isn't the way how it works. Older guys like me are supposed to catch the ball and give them to kids." And I added that if she got one, I wanted her to keep it, to which she said, "I don't want it, I want you to have it." Off she went to the rail, where I watched her constantly for 2 innings, while she waved her hand every time an A's player came by. I looked away for a second, and up the steps she came running, as her brother had done just a little while before, smiling and holding that ball, then handing it over to me. I told her with all honesty it was the sweetest thing anyone had ever done for me. I then proceeded to tell all the folks around me what had happened, just beaming with pride. At one point, Lucy said, "Uncle Eric, are you crying?" I looked at her, not quite knowing if she was seeing something in my eyes, on my face, or if she had somehow managed to figure me out even at her young age. And I replied, "No, Lucy, but I might be." I told her if she really wanted me to have the ball, I needed her to do one more thing. She did. She signed it, and it now has a prominent spot on my living room mantle. Or, yes, there we go. And there it is. So thank you, Lucy. From the same chapter, To Catch a Ball. This is my son's story. There's a little bit of family affair going on today, and I hope you'll indulge me in that. At a Giants game at AT&T Park in 2010, I was with my dad, sitting in our regular seats down the first base line. Edgar Renteria, the Giants shortstop, hit a foul ball, which was caught by the person right in front of me. While I had previously caught a ball in a different part of the stadium, these seats were in prime foul ball territory, but they hadn't produced the same luck for me. Disappointed but undeterred, I watched the right-handed Renteria get back into the box with my glove religiously on my hand. Who would guess that on the very next pitch, he would hit a screaming line drive right at me? In a sandlot moment, I reached out my glove among a sea of hands and silently sent the thought, "Please catch it." Sure enough, I felt contact, and I squeezed my hand like my life depended on it. The force and the body surrounding me literally spun me around, and my hat flew off my head. Instinctively, and possibly still in shock from my gold glove caliber defensive catch, I bent down to search for my hat, forgetting to let the crowd at home and in the stadium shower me with applause. Since all the great catches are shown on TV, I naturally assumed mine would be too, with special commentary from Kook and Kipe. We went home and watched the replay. There it was, the foul ball into the stands. But there was no highlight reel-worthy catch. All they showed was a brief moment of my back, head down, looking for my hat, and an attempted high five from my dad sitting next to me. I got no special attention, no respect, no praise from Kook and Kipe. Lesson learned. When you catch a ball, ignore all else and hoist that ball high up in the air. Maybe give a shout or a fist pump. Oh, and that won't happen ever again in our seats. They're now blocked off by a screen. And that's David Gray. I met the next story author on the train going to the ballpark. And this is his story. It's from the chapter, Just Another Day at the Ballpark. My former high school, Golden West in Visalia, California, was a perennial varsity baseball powerhouse with many championships under their belt. I was lucky enough to be the stadium PA announcer for more than 2 decades, and I saw a lot of great baseball. Being paid to watch the game and talk over the loudspeakers with nobody telling me to shut up, well, that was heaven. The teams were always well coached and successful, but the school district wouldn't buy a scoreboard worth spit. It was nothing more than a postage stamp with tiny light bulbs, which often either broke down or wouldn't light up the correct number of bulbs for the ball and strike count. Maybe the score was correct, maybe it wasn't. The stadium was located by the St. Johns River, the riverbanks heavily populated with ground squirrels, which, we were told, had an affinity for electrical wire. They were twice blamed for eating the wiring to the AC chillers on campus, creating some rather hot classrooms and very unhappy teachers and students. At one game, our scoreboard was in rare form. Balls were lit up as strikes, the score would jump 2 or 3 runs instead of 1 at a time, and it wouldn't work at all, so there was nobody to tell me how many outs there were. That day's umpire had deluded himself into thinking this high school ballpark was really Yankee Stadium, and he was becoming visibly upset with me. He kept motioning to the scoreboard, then the press box, then back to the coaches in our dugout. Finally, at the second batter in the 3rd or 4th inning, this home plate ump walked toward the backstop fence below the press box, and believing that I was trying purposely to show him up, he gave me the heave-ho. At first, I had no idea what he was doing. "You threw out the stadium announcer? Seriously?" I stood up, extended my arms with palms up, and asked, "What the heck?" He really didn't like that, and he pointed me again and vigorously threw me out again. I was going to the showers until our coach, thankfully a good friend of mine, went to the ump, and after a rather heated discussion and much explaining how these evil squirrels had likely decimated our postage stamp of a scoreboard, it was decided I could stay. They would keep score on the field instead. Gee, what a great idea. Now, why didn't I think of that? Thus, certain tragedy was averted, the ejection of the stadium announcer, at least until the next game. That's Tim McGlasson from Visalia, California. This is another story from the chapter My Player, My Team, My Game. How does a love for baseball develop? You hear tales of Ebbets Field and cowbells, Comiskey Park and Nancy Faust's organ, eating your first Dodger dog, or being a bum in the fields at Wrigley. Be it Koufax, Ted Williams, Reggie's 3 bombs in '77, or Junior's backwards cap, someone turned all fans' eyes that first time, and baseball became their love. Mine? It was a little-known outfielder from Puerto Rico, Pepe Mangual, who played from '72 to '77 with the Expos and Mets. My first live game started my love affair. A walk-off grand slam? Nah, he had no pop. Steal of home? He had speed, but nothing that dramatic. Game-saving catch? He was a decent outfielder, but again, no. On Friday, September 5th, 1975, a young, hopeful, but not terribly talented last-place Expos team took on the first-place Pirates in a twilight doubleheader. It was my first time inside Jarry Park, which until then had been nothing but a dream castle on the TV to a 9-year-old who'd started loving baseball in 1974. In the opener, Bruce Kyson was wild, didn't make it out of the first. Bob Moose, who would tragically die 13 months later, came in to toss 5 2/3 innings. Here I'm going to stop, digress for a moment, and say to those of you who don't know, the Pirates in those years had 3 pitchers named Veal, Moose, and Lamb. You can't make that up. Back to the game. The score went back and forth, and into extra innings we went. My young blood was pumping. Jarry Park was rocking to the house organ, with 15,000 plus fans on their feet as the Expos came up. Young side-arming Kent DeColvey took the mound. Walks, wild pitches, and pass balls got McKinnon to third, Lyle to second, and Jerry White to first. The bases loaded for center fielder Pepe Mangual. Pepe had entered the game as a pinch hitter in the 7th inning, hitting a nondescript .247. But what would a kid know other than that it was the bottom of the 10th and the bases were loaded? Bruce Fremming was the umpire behind the plate. I can't recall how many pitches were thrown, but the count was 2-2 as Pepe fouled off pitch after pitch, every fan on their feet screaming, willing Pepe to not fail. I was in awe, and I wanted, in that moment, more than anything ever, to win the game. It had been a horrific week in my life, filled with trauma. A young boy from small town Towanda, Pennsylvania, I went to visit my grandparents, not knowing my parents were splitting up, and that I would never return home. I was to stay in Montreal, a new kid in school, with French-speaking folks hating English-speaking people, and vice versa, mere months before a separatist government would come to power, forever changing the Quebec landscape. It was a terrifying experience for this small-town kid. None of that mattered right now. I just needed Pepe to win it for us. He worked the count full, then fouled off a couple more. I couldn't take it anymore. The next pitch was just a little outside, as Bob Uecker might say. Fleming motion, ball 4. And the Expos mobbed Pepe as he trotted to first, and McKinnon walked home. A 4-3 Expos victory. For that small, scared, 9-year-old boy who would have to face his new life and surroundings once again on Monday morning, nothing else mattered. I found love in Montreal. The love of the Expos, the love of Pepe Mangual, my new could do no wrong hero, and my greatest new love, one that would last a lifetime, baseball. That's Patrick Gutton, who is a disc jockey in Sandpoint, Idaho. And I want to just say that this story, frankly, as well as the one that I read about Joshua Atkins before, this has a special meaning for me because for whatever reason, my granddaughter calls me Pepe. And just as Joshua can't wait to take his grandkid to a game, Lynn and I took our first granddaughter, Juliet, to her first game, and it was spectacular. In 2011, the Phillies were on the way to their 5th straight National League pennant with a 102-win season. With a hitting core of Rollins, Utley, Pence, and Howard, and a rotation including Hamels, Lee, Oswalt, and Halladay, they were a powerhouse team that captured the heart of the city. One Friday afternoon, I was hanging out playing video games with a friend, and on my way home, I got a text, but I couldn't tell who it was from. The texter said he had free seats behind the Phillies dugout and a parking pass. If I wanted to go, I should meet him at a specific bar. My interest in baseball had waned over the years, but this sounded like a good deal for my first game of the year. I arrived at the bar to find the texter was my college friend Brian, with whom I had lost touch. He told me he'd been given free tickets, but couldn't find a girl to go with him, so you're it. We got pretty bombed drinking scotch, too drunk to drive, so we took the subway. The train was packed with people, pumped for the game, and also a nearby concert. It was a perfect summer Friday night. When we arrived, we gave away our parking pass, figured we would give in return for what we were getting. We got to our seats in the second inning, and they were, as I'd been told, right behind the dugout. We were disappointed that with the team I described above, we were seeing Vance Worley pitch, but again, the tickets had been free. The man who'd given Brian the tickets was there with his girlfriend. At one point, he'd mentioned he'd been to hundreds of games, but had never caught a ball. During the game, we chatted with Utley and Howard. As Raul Ibanez came running toward the dugout, I stood up, beer in my left hand, outstretched right hand, and he tossed the ball, which fell right into my hand. Remembering the earlier conversation, I offered our host the ball, but he told me to give it to the kids in front of him. I gave it to one, and his father asked if I wanted anything for it. I said no, and I told him to read to his son that summer. Worley threw a no-hitter for 7 innings or so, and the game ended in the bottom of the 9th on a walk-off hit by Ben Francisco. The stadium's Liberty Bell lit up, moving back and forth, fireworks went off, and 45,000 plus fans went home happy. On the subway back to Brian's place, a nice older woman who had been to the game sat next to me. She asked me if I wanted her Phillies hat, and I politely declined. She then asked the same question about a t-shirt, and I gave her the same reply. She then asked if I wanted her gift bag, which contained a towel of the 4 pitching aces, a t-shirt, hat, and pin. She pointed to a man across the aisle and said he was the mayor of Clearwater, the Florida town where the Phillies have spring training. The Phillies had paid for their trip. She then pointed to a beautiful young woman and said she was her daughter. "Do you like her?" she asked me. "That's her fiance, and I don't like him." Now, I suppose it would have been a little too much and a lot old world to have her give me her daughter as well as the goodies in the bag. It was a great night, one filled with giving and receiving, all things that just happened. There just seemed to be so much karma going around. It was the night that I refell in love with baseball and the Phillies. That's from Shivam Patel in Bensalem, Pennsylvania. It's always fun, while most of these stories are from my second book, it's always fun to go back and revisit stories from the first. And I'm going to read a couple of short ones and a longer one. I was at a spring training game, Royals versus Rangers, on St. Patty's night. At the end of the game, a group of Kansas City players was leaving the field. One of them was Alex Gordon. As he passed a row of fans on the third base side, he put his game bat in the glove of an 8 or 9-year-old kid and walked on. You can imagine the look on the kid's face. He lit up like the stadium lights coming on. Someone asked the kid, "Is he your favorite player now?" And the kid replied, "He already was." It was great to see as a fan. Really helps remind me that even with the amount of ink spent on issues with performance-enhancing drugs, there's still a great heartbeat to the game, thanks to players like Alex Gordon and his kind. That's from Sam Desiato. It's from the chapter that's called Bunts. Here's another short one from our friend and Lynn's fellow genealogist, Ken Enton. On June 20th, 1963, the Mets were playing the Yankees at Yankee Stadium in the first of an almost 20-year annual contest, the Mayor's Trophy game. Duke Snider, back in New York with the Mets at the tail end of his great career, was playing center, and marvelous Marv Throneberry was in right. One of the Yankees hit a ball to right center. Throneberry called for it and then fell down trying to catch it. Instead of going after the ball, Snider proceeded to put his hands on his knees and just started laughing. Needless to say, it was an inside-the-park home run, but the sight of Snider laughing at Throneberry sprawled on the ground was priceless. The Mets were really hapless, but fun to watch. And they won that game 6-2, providing a measure of revenge for the Mets and former Yankees manager, Casey Stengel. Again, that's from Ken Enton. And here's a story, another one from the first book, from the chapter of International Baseball. I was a naive little kid from Chicago, soaking it all in at a Montreal Expos game on a family vacation. The announcers were announcing in French. The signs were in French. The fans were cheering in French. Everything was in French, and I was marveling at my first exposure to a foreign culture, the existence of an entire world beyond the one that I knew so well. That is, until the outfielder dropped the ball with the bases loaded, and everyone around me started dropping F-bombs in English. That's the only thing I remember about that baseball game, that family trip, and my first geopolitical wake-up call. And that's from our niece, Dana Rhodes in Skokie, Illinois. There are a lot of really great stories in both books. And by the way, when I keep talking about great stories and how great the books are, please understand, I'm not bragging about myself. It's how lucky I was to be able to get these stories from around the world. And this particular story, it's someone I become friends with, and I would ask him periodically if he had a story to share, and he said, "I will." And then one day, just as I was about to finish the first book, this story was posted on Facebook. And I contacted him, and we were able to squeeze it into this book. It's a little long. There are a lot of great stories that I don't read because they're too long, and they wouldn't give me the opportunity to read a lot of other stories. But I'm going to make one exception today. Growing up, one of my prized possessions was a silver Sears transistor radio my dad gave me for my 7th birthday in 1959. When I asked where he got it, he told me he found it at the thrift shop on the Air Force Base where he worked. It had your name on it, he said. It was the best present I could have wanted. My dad traveled a lot and he always gave us a lot of gifts. And for me, that generally meant a sports magazine or a book. My library grew with the years as Dad was away a lot in the 60s. Always nearby was my trusty radio. Nights on the Montana prairie with wide open spaces and few local radio stations meant programs ranging as far east as Minneapolis, St. Louis, Calgary, Vancouver in Canada, and west of Seattle and Portland, California, Phoenix, and Denver. Night after night, when the neighborhood kids were done playing baseball or touch football, I sat on our porch, glued to my buddy, the radio. One hot night, thumbing the dial, I found KFI Los Angeles. In my ear were Vin Scully and Jerry Doggett doing Dodgers baseball. So exciting, Major League Baseball in Montana on an August 1960 night. Mom called me in for bedtime, and I hid the little magic radio under my pillow so she wouldn't see it. Later, I turned it on low so my parents couldn't hear it. And there were Vin and Jerry again. Drysdale had just brushed Cepeda back with an inside fastball, and the dugouts emptied. The signal disappeared, and when it returned, Vin was asking the fans to yell out, "Happy birthday" to Frank Sikori, that night's home plate umpire. 50,000 voices rose as one to serenade him. I was probably one of the few kids in Montana to witness this. There was, however, one time when my silver radio got me into more trouble than a young man could ever understand. I took my trusty friend with me when I was sworn into the U.S. Army. My drill sergeants at basic training never knew my radio station was my constant companion. I got through basic training with the secret intact. When my unit traveled cross-country in the fall of 1975 to participate in the War Games exercise, it went along in my pack. These were exciting times in the baseball world. The plucky Boston Red Sox were matching the World Series against the powerhouse Big Red Machine, the Cincinnati Reds. We arrived at Fort Bragg, North Carolina, in time to hear games 3, 4, and 5 on a radio that one of our cooks brought. There was even popcorn and Kool-Aid in the chow tent. By the night of Game 6, however, we were well involved with maneuvers. My job, with one of my friends, was to hunker down in a foxhole and watch for enemy activity. When it occurred, we were to call it in our two-way radio to company headquarters. The night passed on rather silently, save that little silver radio, which picked up Game 6 on a local station. We took turns holding my radio in the back of the foxhole, while the other pulled sentry duty. Around midnight, all hell broke loose. Carlton Fisk came to bat in the bottom of the 12th and socked a very memorable home run off the foul pole at Fenway. The Red Sox won 7-6. The series was tied at 3 games each. Boston fans went wild with joy. Unfortunately, so did I. From somewhere down deep in my gut came a war whoop that could wake the dead. And it did, for hundreds of feet in every direction on that battlefield. Sirens went off. Powerful searchlights turned on. The battlefield became a parade ground full of intense activity. Soon, a jeep full of officers pulled up in front of our foxhole. A rather severe-looking full-bird colonel jumped out of the jeep, followed closely by a unit commander and first sergeant and a war games umpire. They proceeded to give me the chewing out of my life. Bluer language was never spoken by so many officers to one lowly private dog-faced soldier. When it was all over, my first sergeant turned to me and said, "I want that radio now." I handed my friend to him. He marched us out to our company area, telling us to bed down for the night. By morning, cooler heads had prevailed. The colonel wanted me charged with dereliction of duty and busted with loss of pay, but my officers found out about the mystery of my little silver radio and asked him to let them handle it. He reluctantly agreed, after ordering my commander not to let me back in the war games and keeping me out of his sight for the rest of our stay. My punishment for bringing my radio to Fort Bragg was to write a 500-word essay on the importance of signal intelligence and security in Army maneuvers. In addition, I was restricted to the company area for the balance of our time there. I wrote my essay that night in the chow tent, munching popcorn and listening to Game 7 on our cook's radio. Later that night, the first sergeant entered the tent, walked up to me, handed over my little silver radio. Top winked at me, did an about face, and marched out of the tent whistling, "Take me out to the ball game." I had learned my lesson. Baseball and war games don't mix, and be careful who you show your secrets with. And that's from Dale Chenoweth in Maynooth, Ontario, Canada. Okay, I'm going to stop for just 1 second and kind of remind everybody that this is being recorded. If you wish to donate, the link is there. It's the World Central Kitchen.
You've already got $290.
Okay, great. We've gotten $290 already. That's wonderful. Thank you all. That's exceeded our goal. That doesn't mean you can't keep giving if more people have turned on. So thank you. And let me keep on reading. This is Lynn's story. Near the end of 2019 season, Eric and I were in our usual place in section 104, row 8. With us were our neighbor Frank and a friend Sid. Eric and I enjoy sharing our love of the game with friends. A big part of the enjoyment is having conversations with the folks around and in front of us, making new friends and acquaintances, which seems to happen at every game we attend. We've been part of a season ticket group since the Giants Stadium opened in 2000, sharing 4 seats for 81 games. At the beginning, our kids, Rachel and David, generally accompanied us, although Rachel, in high school, was already working for the Giants in guest services. So, whether with our kids, friends of ours, or friends of our kids, we would always find folks to fill the 4 seats. Now with the kids grown, David having moved to Washington, D.C. in 2010, and Rachel working most home games, it's been our practice to invite friends to join us. And our habit is to have them sit between us to make conversations easier with people we don't often see. And so it was at this particular game. Eric was on the inside, next to him Sid, then me, Frank on the aisle. At some point during the game, David texted Eric, asking if it was a good time to talk. Eric texted back that we were at the ball game. David asked, uncharacteristically, who we were with. After Eric texted him with the answer, David replied, "Okay, we'll talk tomorrow." Eric, being a bit of a worrier, asked if something was wrong, and David replied cryptically, "It depends." Not being able to let that go, Eric replied, worry, I'm a little worried." David replied, "Oh, you are so needy." Moments later, my phone rang with a FaceTime call from David's wife, Lisa. With the game on the field in front of us, I answered the call and saw David sitting rather stone-faced on my screen. He slowly raised a tablet from his lap, and on the screen, I read the words in large letters, "Hi, future grandparents." An involuntary exclamation, "Wow!" escaped my lips as Sid, sitting to my right, looked at the screen with me. As I sat there with a big grin on my face, Sid had the presence of mind to suggest to Eric, sitting to his right, that they exchange seats. That's the story of how we found out that we were going to be grandparents, fittingly for us at a ball game. Well, that is, Sid and I found out that Eric and I were going to be grandparents. As soon as Eric was in on the call, we shared our excitement with David and Lisa and Sid and Frank and all the fans sitting around us within earshot. We kept the call brief, as the sounds of the game made it hard to carry on conversation. I do recall, however, a number of congrats from the folks in the rows above and below us. And that's Lynn's story. This is from the chapter that's called An Autograph, a Picture, a Chat with a Star. On September 24th, 1972, my family made the 3.5-hour drive from upstate New York to Shea Stadium in Queens, where the Phillies were in town to play my favorite team, the Mets. It was a classic pitching matchup, Steve Carlton versus Tom Seaver, whom Carlton called his greatest rival. Carlton was having a Cy Young year, and Seaver would win it in the next. The matchup lived up to its billing, Seaver outdueling Carlton 1-0. I was 9 years old, and after the game, I waited outside the stadium for player autographs. Carlton came walking over to the team bus. I figured he'd be upset with the loss, but I still held out my ball for him to autograph. He literally pushed me aside and walked onto the bus without signing. 20 years later, I was snowboarding in Durango, Colorado. Waiting in the small airport for my flight home, I saw someone who looked familiar. Sure enough, it was Steve Carlton. We were the only two in the waiting area. I found a pen and I asked him if he would sign my ticket envelope. I told him I grew up a Mets fan, but I admired the way he pitched. After he signed my envelope, I mentioned that I saw him pitch against Seaver in the Mets. I said, "You lost that game 1-0, but it was a great game." He forced a smile and began reading his magazine. That's Jeff Shaw in St. Petersburg, Pennsylvania, Florida. Sorry. This is from the chapter, I heard it on the radio, I saw it on TV. On October 13th, 1960, I was 10 years old, growing up in a little Pennsylvania farm town on Lake Erie. Baseball had always seemed like a slow, boring game to me. The local high school had football, basketball, and track teams, but not baseball. However, my dad had grown up in Pittsburgh with his beloved Pirates, the perennial losers who'd last won a World Series in 1925. On this October beautiful day, my family was making its annual fall trip across the state to visit family in the Philadelphia area, and miraculously, the Pirates were playing the Yankees in Game 7 of the World Series. No one had expected the Pirates to win the pennant, and certainly no one thought the series would go 7 games. But here were Skinner, Grote, Mazeroski, and Burgess playing Mantle, Maris, Berra, and Kubek. As we drove across the state on the Pennsylvania Turnpike, we listened to the game on the radio. I had never seen Dad this excited. The game was back and forth, the Pirates scoring first and leading 4-0 by the end of the second inning. But then the Yankees went ahead 5-4 in the sixth. The problem was that every time we went through a tunnel on the turnpike, the radio had cut out. We'd exit and the score had changed. At the end of the eighth, as we came out of the next to last tunnel, it was 9-7 Pirates. And then in the top of the ninth, just as we entered the final tunnel, the Yankees scored 2 runs to tie the game. We emerged as Pirate Bill Mazeroski came to the plate. The rest is history. Maz's walk-off home run to deep left field is one of the most famous in all of baseball. The lowly Pittsburgh Pirates had defeated the mighty Yankees. It was the only time I ever saw tears in my dad's eyes, and I fell in love with the game of baseball. Over 50 years later, that love affair continues, but never has a game been sweeter than that one in 1960. And I think certainly every Yankee fan who was around in those days remembers where they were when Mazeroski hit that home run. I know I sure do. Not a Yankee fan anymore, but I was growing up. And speaking of the Yankees and Mickey Mantle, I will read this story. This is mine, and it's from the chapter called Mickey, Willie, and the Stars of the Golden Age of Baseball. Somehow, some way, I managed to have a ticket to the Yankees game on June 8th, 1969. This was no ordinary game. It was Mickey Mantle Day at Yankee Stadium. I was going to the game at which his iconic number 7 was to be retired. I was 16 years old, and my first love had been the Yankees, with all due respect to Adele, my 6th grade girlfriend, who has a story in this book. By 1969, my baseball affections were split between the Yankees and the amazing Mets, who captivated the nation by winning the 1969 World Series. But on this day, nothing mattered more than being here to honor my hero, my first hero, the only sports hero I've ever had. Sitting in the upper deck down the left field line, I, along with 300,000 fans, you know what they say, far more people witness every major baseball event than the stadiums could hold. I sat in anxious anticipation. What would the festivities entail? Which Yankee greats, all of them it turned out, would be there to participate? My memories of this day are faint, although research has helped. I didn't know who I was with, but it must have been my dad. I don't remember who the Yankees' opponent was, or who won, although the internet told me that the Yankees swept the White Sox in the doubleheader. I remember a 13.5-minute standing ovation, although different accounts range from 6 to 20. I was even wrong about what I was certain I accurately remembered. Mantle's golf cart drove around the park to kick off the festivities. That ride apparently occurred after the rest of the ceremonies. Incidentally, he passed by my section about a minute and a half into a 2.5-minute ride. None of these details are important. All that's important is I was there, and I know my eyes were quite moist. Was this my favorite game of all time? I talk about several games in my stories in these books, and I guess I'm not prepared to make that call. I do know that along with the 61,000 plus fans who really were there that day, I think of that day often and still with moist eyes. And I remember the day in I think it was 1995, when we were at a summer camp up in Yosemite, and I got the news that Mickey Mantle had died, and I cried. I want to read this story. This is from the chapter called Home Runs, and it's really a wonderful story. There's an expression that baseball is life, and that means that not every story is going to be happy or fun. And this is one of those exceptions. I was a girl who loved baseball. Not softball, mind you, hardball. I usually played first base, sometimes third, but my passion was batting. I could hit the ball hard and far. I thrilled to the crack of the ball against the bat, the trademark up so as not to split it. It was recess. I stood at the plate watching the pitcher wind up and release the ball. It headed into the strike zone. I shifted my weight to my right foot, gripped the handle of the bat, and raised it ever so slightly over my shoulder, tensed, ready to knock the ball far beyond the outfielder's reach. I swung full power, anticipating the sound of a home run. I was amazed when I heard, instead, a smush. It felt soft like hamburger, modeling clay, like a wad of wet tissues. My head followed the arc of the bat to see what had gone wrong. Jolene stood behind me, blood gushing from her face, her orphan Annie eyes huge and vacant, fingers splayed in front of her face, afraid to touch what might be missing. For an endless moment, the world stopped, a soundless tableau of school children at recess. And then in a collective breath, they swarmed toward the schoolhouse, the teacher and Jolene in the lead. I stood alone on home plate, stunned into silence, bat dangling limp at my side. I turned my back and walked slowly to my house, a block from the schoolyard. No one was home. Dad was logging up on the Coast Range. Mom was seeing to Jolene. She was Jolene's teacher. I sat on the edge of the front porch that fall afternoon, doubting my mom's love and Dad's judgment in insisting I be good at a boys' game. Most of all, I doubted me. How had I become capable of causing a sweet, harmless girl so much pain, maybe disfigurement? Maybe she would even die. All I had wanted, intended, was to show how good I was at baseball, as good as any boy. I'd felt strong and bold, confident of my batting skills. Now I felt betrayed, tricked by some unseen God that I now doubted as well. Jolene lived. Despite all the blood, she had her head, her eyes, her brain, her face, a bit worse for the blow, but fixable. A broken nose, split lip, broken front teeth, deep colorful bruising. For weeks I spent my allowance on presents for her, coloring books and crayons, paper dolls, comic books, and candy you didn't have to chew. Jolene recovered and never allowed the cruelty of my act to alter her sweet disposition. She still thought I was cool. I could see it in her eyes and her now crooked smile. And that's from Nancy Pyburn in Vancouver, Washington. All right. This story is from, as I was collecting stories, I realized that I wanted more than anything to get stories from people who watch baseballs in the 30s and 40s, the 20s. And of course, the longer we go, the fewer those people are around. And I came up with the idea to get stories from people about what their grandparents or parents or uncles and aunts had told them. So the chapter is called Stories Handed Down. And this is, I think, a really lovely one. As a kid during the mid-70s, many of my paper route customers were senior citizens, and I enjoyed listening to their stories. One that always stuck out was Mr. Chilson's tale of his journey from Hartford County, Connecticut, to Chicago for the first Major League Baseball All-Star Game in 1933. He and a college buddy decided on a whim to head out, driving on the patchwork of poorly maintained network of roads to the promised land, Comiskey Park. He told of adventures stopping in small towns along the way, the eye-popping socio-cultural differences between the places, and the fun and sense of adventure that permeated the whole trip. Arriving in Chicago, they stayed with a relative for a night, and then it was off to the big game. Mr. Chilson recalled being awestruck by seeing all the mythic legends of the game on one field. In that era, before television and regular use of color photography, they had only ever seen their heroes in grainy black and white newspaper photos or scratchy sped up newsreel highlights. But now, here, right before them in color, were Babe and Gehrig, Jimmy Fox and Lefty Grove, and so many more. After the game was over, they duly piled back in the car for the long, circuitous journey home. He spoke glowingly of these things, the 19-year-old in him coming back to life in his twinkling eyes as he shared these precious memories with me. Now, 45 years later, I can still see his face lighting up, animatedly telling me the tale. I was lucky indeed, and glad I always took the time to listen. That's from Kevin Crane in Enfield, Connecticut. I'm going to take like the eighth inning stretch. I've just got a couple more I'm going to read, but I want to say to those of you, I don't know how many people are still on, but
15 people on. I've asked people to say hi. Is that everybody has commented?
okay.
Why don't you ask if anybody just say hi?
Okay. If you're still on, please say hi. We're recording this. Hopefully we could send the link to people who were on and couldn't stay, or to people who couldn't make it today. But I want to make this comment. So, if you have a baseball story, please send it to me. There's a good chance that I will do a third book. You will know how to contact me, but my email address is eric.baseballstories@gmail. But my next project, I think many of you know, is my music and concert stories book. Similar, of course, to this in structure, but it's about music concerts. Because, and I know you don't say this to a baseball audience, I love baseball. Music is a far greater love for me. And I can't wait to do this book. And I'll tell you briefly two very quick stories. One is my story. I was at what I think is the greatest concert of all time, the concert for Bangladesh. It's George Harrison's concert to raise money for the nation when it first became one. Harrison, Ringo, Bob Dylan, Eric Clapton, Leon Russell, Billy Preston, my second favorite band of all time, Badfinger. It was just an amazing show. And when Harrison did, and when he left the stage at the end of the show, after singing "We've Got to Relive Bangladesh One Last Time," I got goosebumps, and I will never forget that moment. But I'll also never forget the moment of when the girl who I was dating turned to me amidst all this talent, and she said, "Oh, this is so loud." And I looked at her and I thought, but did not say, "Oh, you're so not the one for me." Finally, the other story I want to tell you is my brother's story. He went to see, anybody out there? I assume most of you know Peter Noon, Herman from Herman's Hermits. He went to see Peter Noon, I don't know, 10, 12, 15 years ago, whatever. He still does great shows. And his wife told him to buy Herman's Greatest Hits, because Peter Noon would sign it. He did. And as Noon was signing it, my brother, let's just say, made an interesting comment and said to Peter Noon, my brother, meaning me, my brother and I had this debate, discussion, argument. Who's better, who was better, Herman's Hermits or the Beatles? My brother thought the Beatles, I thought Herman's Hermits. Peter Noon looked up from signing and says to my brother, "You was wrong." And that is a story that he told me one time, and never had to write it down. I remember it clear as day. Anyway, please send me your stories if you're interested. I can send you a book description if you let me know. And let's kind of get on with the last couple of stories we got. This is from a woman that I met at a softball game. She was down right field, and we needed women to play that day. She wasn't able to play, but she gave me a gift much greater than that. This story. My favorite baseball memory took place at a Mariners game against the visiting Yankees. My stepdad gets good tickets for advertising with the team, so we were sitting behind home plate and first base, maybe the 15th row. Prime real estate. Mom, my stepdad, a friend, and I were watching the game when someone hopped the fence between plays. I'd seen people on the field before, and it's always entertaining watching them zigzag around trying to avoid the police. The cops finally caught this guy and hauled him off, and the game continued. Just 15 minutes later, another guy hopped the fence. Again, the police were chasing this guy around who was hooping and hollering, making the most of his 15 seconds of fame. Now everyone in the crowd was attentive, wondering if it would happen again. Well, the floodgates had opened and a woman jumped on the field. At this point, all the ushers who stand at the top of the stairs to hold people back during play of game moved down to the aisles, watching like hawks for more potential runners. Much good that did, because lo and behold, half an hour later, another person was running on the field, this time a streaker. Buck naked, this guy was running around, the police were chasing him, this time with a towel. It was like the most hilarious reverse of a bull and matador. The best part of the whole thing was that when the cops finally grabbed him and wrapped him in the towel, he waited until he was about halfway off the field to shake his hips and lose the towel one last time. I don't think I've ever seen a crowd more attentive than for the rest of the game. Speaking of the game, we were tied with the Yankees until that point, and the game went into extra innings. It was so satisfying to see the Mariners crush them in the 13th inning with an epic home run. Definitely the best game of my life. That's Erica Duncan in Mountain View, California. This is from a chapter called Ushers and Vendors and Ball Boys, Oh My, and it happens to be my daughter's story. Jeff Kent just rode in my elevator. It's happened before, and usually I just smile, but today was destined to be different. Jeff was going to the 4th floor, and there were people stopping on every floor on the way up. One of them apologized to everyone, and I seized the opportunity to say, "No problem. It gives me more time in the elevator with my favorite baseball player of all time, Jeff Kent." Parenthetically here, no need to mention Matt Cain or the complexities of my ranking system at that particular moment, I felt. "Oh, thank you," said the man with the only mustache I've ever liked. "I'm not even kidding," I insisted. Okay, I gushed, as I had decided to let myself go full-on fangirl. "I still wear number 21. Well, I don't actually play anything, but it's in my email address." I wouldn't have blamed him for not wanting to respond, but he kindly asked, "Are you here all stuck in here all day?" I had already embarrassed myself, so I just went with it. "Yes, but it's totally worth it." He smiled and said, "Good to meet you," and shook my hand. This quite literally is what I had hoped for in applying for this job in the first place. Life goal achieved. So what do I do now? I don't need this job anymore, haha. That's from Rachel Grade. And yes, Rachel, you do, but that's for another discussion. And I'm going to finish with this story, somebody I met at a ball game during spring training. And here it is. July 29th, 1990, I was at Candlestick Park with my wife, Diane. Our seats were 12 rows up from first base, an area where you had to be ready to catch a ball at any time. In the bottom half of the first inning, I noticed a rather large fan carefully picking his way through the maze of legs, feet, beers, and peanut shells to get to his seat while carrying a large beer and a Polish sausage. Just as he was about to sit down, I heard the crack of a bat and looked up to see a towering foul ball headed his way. With one hand clutching his beer, the other cradling a sausage, you could clearly see the panic and indecision on his face. At the last second, he set his beer cup and Polish on the cement between his feet and reached up to grab the ball, but he was too slow to make the catch. The ball passed between his outstretched hands and, like a guided missile, it scored a direct hit on the sausage, sending up a cloud of meat, mustard, and relish that thoroughly covered the unlucky fan and knocked over his beer. The ball squirted about 5 seats to the left, where another fan made an easy catch of a mustard-slathered ball. Needless to say, we all felt very sorry for the poor fellow as he trudged back up the aisle, covered in the remnants of what should have been a fine ballpark meal. The Giants won that day, shutting out the Reds for nothing. This fan, too, was shut out from his lunch and the ballpark's greatest souvenir. And that's from John Aiken in Pine Top, Arizona. I want to thank you all for your attention. I want to thank you all for having to wait that unbearably long time. We feel terrible about it. Lynn's very upset. I'm not upset with her. Boy, none of this would be happening without her, and she did all that she could. But thank you for your donations. Thank you for your friendship. And I hope you've all kind of said that you were here so I can kind of get back to you later on. And I'll send the link out to people who aren't here for the whole thing. And again, thank you very much. And remember to check out my YouTube channel, Basis to Bleachers. Thanks a lot, everybody. Bye. Should I hit stop screaming?
Yeah, somebody just asked for the donation link. Oh, did you hit? It's not going. Oh, well. Oh, I know, okay.
Did you stop it?
Stop it. Somebody just arrived